Namaste. Welcome back to the weekly webinars. This Raksha Bandhan, along with chocolates and shopping vouchers, why not gift something unique, like wisdom that transforms lives? Here's how. Get Jayaji's entire collection, Bhagavad Gita commentary, books, courses, and more at half price. Order worth 7,000 rupees and pay only 3,500. Offer is valid till 10th August. Visit vedantavision.org today to find a gift as priceless as your sibling. Our Guru Purnima celebrations are far from over. Jayaji will be in Bangalore on Sunday 10th August for a talk on Law of Karma Decoded. The talk is open to all and registration is free. You'll find the link in the description box. Now, let us conclude chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita with Jayaji.
ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
So we had completed up to verse 37. There is a question here that he wants us to go over verse 30, which is the 6-point path to perfect action. Now, there are two things that we need to do. One is generate energy within ourselves. Most of us don't have that energy. You wake up tired. By the time you go to work in the morning, you need coffee to perk you up. And through the day, you're drinking cups of coffee to just have enough energy to go through the day. So we need to generate that energy. And this energy that is generated, avoid its dissipation in unproductive channels. Okay? So there are 3 ways of generating energy and 3 ways in which you avoid dissipation. How do you generate energy? Why 3? Because we have 3 equipment. What are these 3 equipment? Body, mind, intellect. So with the intellect, see, thoughts have energy, thoughts have force, thoughts have power. If the intellect directs all the thoughts, your emotions, your actions towards one goal that you fixed for yourself. And earlier he has said that you have to fix a higher goal. Okay? Then you generate energy. And we gave the example of a convex lens in sunlight. And you hold a piece of paper at the right distance, what happens? It burns. Without the convex lens, nothing happens. So thoughts directed towards one particular goal, all actions towards that goal, generate energy. There's power there. Second, surrender. The mind must surrender to that goal, which means that goal takes precedence over everything else. You're devoted to that goal, you're dedicated to that goal, you have a passion for that goal, you love it. So when you surrender to a higher goal, you gain power. Gandhiji had power. How? He had nothing. He had no financial backing. He had no military prowess, armies with him. He had nothing. Where did he gain that power from? Why did the British listen to him even? Because he had surrendered to the cause of 300 million Indians. Similarly, if you surrender to a higher cause, like Ustad Bismillah Khan had surrendered to the Shehnai, he loved it, he called it his Begum. Ustad Zakir Hussain was totally dedicated to music, not to amass a fortune with it. In fact, there was one tabla player, one of his students, who went to him and said very proudly, I have, entered some world record for the longest period of time that he has played tabla at Gateway of India. So Zakir Hussain told him, so what is the big deal in that? What are you boasting about? किसी मंदिर में जाके बजाओ, किसी गुरुद्वारा में जाके बजाओ. That has more impact than playing at Gateway of India and your name coming in the Limca book of records. So that surrender has value, has power. And the second is, with the body, act dynamically. The more you act, the more energy you generate. Which is why post-surgery, almost immediately, however much pain the patient may have, they get that patient out of bed and walking. So these are the three ways in which you generate energy. This energy is dissipated in three channels: worry over the past, anxiety for the future, and excitement in the present. So when Manu Bhakar won the Bronze Award, she was asked, what did you think of while you were shooting, that moment when you were shooting? She said, my mother taught me the Bhagavad Gita, and the Bhagavad Gita says, while acting, don't let your mind go to future. Because past. She could have gone back to the Tokyo Olympics where she performed badly. She could go to the future, will I get it, won't I get it? And then her action would have been flawed. See, in any sport, it is that moment, that second, that you have to focus. So, clip the past, clip the future, and focus on the present. These 6 points you have to do. You got it? Any other question? So now, in the 37th verse that we did last time, where Arjuna asked the question, what is it that makes me commit sin even though I know I should not? So he says it is desire, it is anger, born of the quality of rajas. Means desire. It's desire that makes you do wrong things. Wrong in the sense, you go downhill spiritually. You're doing things against your conscience. You know you should not be doing it and still you do it. It could be a simple thing like overeating. It could be more serious stuff. Then now in verse 38, he describes Sattva, Rajas and Tamas in a poetic way. Because it's difficult to understand these concepts. They're subtle. So let's move with verse 38.
धूमेनाव्रियते वह्निः यथादर्शो मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भः तथा तेनेदमावृतम्.
As fire is obscured by smoke, as a mirror by dust, as an embryo by the uterus, so is this. This means Atman. Covered by that means desire. So there are 3 types of desire. And he uses 3 metaphors to describe these. And in all 3, there are 2 things. One is whether you can see Atman even while it is present. Number 2, how much effort do you have to put in to remove it? Okay? So, Sattva he describes as smoke around fire. Now, on a cold wintry night, you may have gone to Mahabaleshwar or any hill station, and in the evening, or Ooty even, you may have experienced that this, you start a fire and you sit out and the fire gives warmth. Now, most of these places, it's very clear. You can see stars in the sky because there's no pollution. And so it's a very pleasant thing. But there is a thin film of smoke around the fire. Can you visualize that? So he's saying sattvic desire is like smoke around fire. Now, what are the two things here? Even though the smoke is there, you can still see the fire, right? Second, you don't need to put in effort to remove the smoke. A passing breeze is enough, it carries the smoke away. Sattvic desire is like that, it's pure, it's unselfish. It is a desire that is for the well-being of a larger cross-section of people. You want the world to be good. Everyone in the world should be happy, healthy. That is your desire. So, or desire for realization. That desire, even when a person is largely sattvic in nature, you can still see divinity through that desire. I'm sure you've met people who you say he has good vibes, right? What are these good vibes? It is sattva, it's purity of heart that comes forth. It just hits you. That is sattvic desire. Then rajasic, it's brilliant. It's so beautifully put. And this was written 5,000 years ago. It's still valid now. We can still understand it. He says, Rajas is like dust on a mirror. You know, if you leave your home for, let's say, 6 months and come back after 6 months, everything is shut, the doors, windows, everything is shut. But there is a film of dust covering everything, including the mirror. So now the two things are, you can't see your reflection in the mirror when the dust is there. It's imperfect. Second, it takes effort to remove that dust. It doesn't go by itself. So you have to take a duster and wipe the mirror. So rajasic desire is selfish desire. There are plus points to it. There is a lot of dynamism in it, and because the person works hard, others also benefit from it. This is typically an industrialist, a politician, people who are driven by selfish desire. They want fortunes for themselves, but in the process, they also do good for a larger cross-section of people. But rajasic desire, you need to put in effort to give it the direction of the higher, because he is very selfish, and that selfishness causes mental agitation, stress. He is ill-tempered, so it's difficult to see Atman through a rajasic person, because what comes out is ego and greed, and these things put you off. Then comes tamas. Tamasic qualities are like an embryo in a womb, in the uterus. Even with modern technology, until the child is born, you really don't know what the child looks like. Isn't it? You do sonography, this, that, and the other, you still don't know. And you can't speed it up. You got to wait. It takes time. So a tamasic person is one who is lazy, who doesn't do anything. He has no motivation even for a selfish purpose. You say, don't you want to do well in life? And he will indulge in activities that put you off, like gambling, drinking, taking drugs, which are self-destructive and are of nuisance value to society. This is tamas. So, in tamas, not only do you need to put an effort, but also you have to wait. It doesn't go immediately. In rajas, you put in effort, you change. But tamas, like you're late all the time. Huh? Have you known people who come late all the time? They never improve. They will always come half an hour late, or 1 hour late, or 2 hours late, and they have no qualms about being late. There's no guilt factor that I'm late, or they just won't go to work. One fine day I don't feel like it, so I don't go. There's no sense of responsibility, there's no accountability, nothing. It's a declaration of what I want to do. Extremely selfish. So, these are the three characteristics, traits, sattva, rajas and tamas. We all have all three. Like, you may be ambitious, rajas. You may be hardworking, also rajas. But you have traces of tamas. You're indisciplined, you're forgetful, you're disorganized. These are all tamasic traits. And then in the midst of all this, you have sattva. That somebody talks about higher things, you come alive. And Indians, they have an incredible combination. And that incredible combination is more than a fair share of sattva. We have that sattvic content. Even a taxi driver has it. Even in a packed train, you see sattva in here and there, which you don't see in other countries. But more than a fair share of tamas, which is why we are a dirty country. Wherever you go, there is filth strewn all around. We have no qualms about dirtying the environment. Late. We have no concept of punctuality. In like the US, if work starts at 9:30, up to 9:25 nobody will be there. Suddenly in those last 5 minutes, everybody rushes in. But by 9:30, everyone is at their desk, from top to bottom. Here, the guy at the top also comes at 12, and everyone else comes late. How do we know that? 5:30 in the morning, there is a traffic jam. Once in Houston, we had to go to the airport. And so I asked my host, how long will it take? So he says, 5:30, there's going to be traffic. I said, what? 5:30 in the morning, here everyone's fast asleep. And the traffic is at 12 noon. 5:30 in the morning. There are people in Los Angeles who are at work at 5:30. And they work through the day. Maybe they leave early, but they work. Work from home means even if you take a toilet break, you have to mention there, I am going to be away for 2 minutes and I'll be back. Otherwise, it's held against you. Where were you? Because if somebody wants to speak to you and they call you, you don't take the phone, they assume that you're fooling around. And action is taken against you. Which is why work from home works there. Work from home doesn't work here. Work from home in India means holiday. So when anyone says, I'll work from home, I write off that person. There's no point. And sure enough, during working hours you call them, they're not there. They don't pick up the phone. So that's the thing. This is tamas. And rajas is now picking up, but otherwise it was almost non-existent. That drive, motivation to achieve is not there among Indians, not much. That must be there. You see, if you want to get out of tamas, you have to substitute it by rajas first. You can't suddenly jump to sattva unless you are predominantly sattvic. Get it? So, in the Ramayana, there are 3 examples of sattva, rajas and tamas. Ravana was rajasic. Kumbhakarna, tamasic. Vibhishan, sattvic. He is the only one in their entire kingdom who, and of course Ravana's wife, who told Ravana, don't do this. It's a deadly sin. You can't just walk away with somebody else's wife, and that too another king. The king of Ayodhya's wife. You just can't get away with it. And unnecessarily, why? And when he didn't listen, Vibhishan went over to Rama's side. So, that is the thing. Now, what helps us to become sattvic is to constantly entertain the thought of the higher, the transcendental, that which is beyond the world. Because the world lures us, it attracts us, it pulls us away from the higher. Don't you see that? Somebody will come and say, oh, it's your birthday, have a party. Or they'll say something or the other, work anniversary. Some excuse you need to celebrate. So you're moving away, you're moving away from the spirit. So under these circumstances, you need a daily pull. That's why we say you must study the Bhagavad Gita on a daily basis. Don't say you don't have the time. Because I will give you examples of people who are extremely busy, industrialists, people who want to meet them have to wait 8 months before they get an appointment with them. And such people study the Bhagavad Gita. I know of one person who went through, in fact, Anushka was surprised, the entire first chapter in one day. So if he can find it in him to go through entire first chapter means how many hours? 7.5 hours. Right? 7.5 hours of lecture in a day. So there is no such thing as you don't have time. If you say you don't have time, it means you don't have the inclination. You have no intention of learning. So, that's the thing. And identify your tamas. See, nobody is there passing judgment on you. But you must understand that your tamasic qualities show up in your conduct, in the way you behave, in the way you interact with people. It shows. You don't want your worst qualities to show, right? And even if people don't say anything, this is why, this tamas is a reason why we will never match up to Chinese. Because they don't have that tamas. So, make a sincere effort to cultivate sattva in you. And it is not only through the study of the Gita. It comes through service. Which is why we keep announcing we need volunteers. Now I am announcing. With the Guru Purnima event on Saturday, I assume you'll be coming. Please volunteer, which means come to Bharati Vidya Bhavan at 5, right? And help with whatever there is to be done. But if you're coming, then you register with Vaishali or Anushka. Why you don't want volunteers? 4:30. Okay. There aren't many people here, but there's one teenager. She's just done her 10th standard. Who after her 10th standard exam, ICSE exam, she offered to work with us as an intern before her college starts. And her mother is getting 7 volunteers, 8. 8 of her friends she managed to get motivated, and they live in Juhu, right, or Andheris. They're not close by. They're coming all the way from there. She's bringing 7 volunteers who have never met me. They have never heard us. Amazing, don't you think? And here are people who have been coming to class for, I don't know, donkey's years. One evening, 1 hour, you can't spare. Anyway, I'm announcing. If you wish to come, please give your names here to these people. And we'll of course provide you with snacks and tea and coffee and all the rest of it. It will be a fun experience for you also. Come, see. And if you get 1 or 2 other volunteers also, it will be nice. So anyway, how to cultivate sattva? Gain knowledge, become service-minded, develop gratitude for all that you have received. Which means basically become positive in your attitude towards life in general. So it's very important to have a positive outlook in life. You can look at the negatives, you can keep complaining, or you can look at the positives. If even there is one positive thing that has happened in your life, or you've come across something positive, let it just suffuse your mind with it. Then you will overlook the negatives. It's okay. Everyone has their nature, everyone has their way of looking at things, everyone has their way of reacting to things. You don't have to get affected by it. And if you have this overwhelmingly positive attitude, you laugh over certain traits that people have. Like we were talking about, we had leaflets made, we were talking about giving them out at 2 people just to spread the word. And one person said, "What's the use? They only throw it." And I said, you do it with your heart. No? Speak to people, tell them what the lecture is about. And they won't react negatively. You just throw it at them, of course, they're going to not look at it. So it depends on your attitude. Whatever you do, if you do it with this positive attitude, it has an impact on others also. Huh? You get into a cab. The driver is frustrated, especially in the evening. He's worked hard, he's fed up with the heat and the traffic. And so he's a little, not nasty, but a little rude to you. It's okay. You say, if I had to work like this for even 1 hour, even I'd be ill-tempered. So it's okay. Yeah? Next verse.
आवृतं ज्ञानमेतेन ज्ञानिनो नित्यवैरिणा कामरूपेण कौन्तेय दुष्पूरेणानलेन च.
O Kaunteya, son of Kunti, Knowledge is veiled by this unquenchable fire in the form of desire, the constant enemy of the wise, constant foe of the wise. Huh? How emphatically he uses 4 words that mean enemy to describe desire, and still we don't get it. So, he describes desire as number 1, unquenchable. There is no desire in the world that when you fulfill, you say, I'm happy. I don't want any more. Is there? No. Any desire, power for a politician, they're not happy with anything. Like they may become the president or prime minister of a country, then they want to influence other nations. Then they want international power. There's no end to it. Wealth, the richest person in the world wants what? More money. Never content. Huh? So what you have to think is, if the richest guy in the world with all that he has is not happy, he wants more, then what is the chance for you and me? You think there is any reasonable scenario where you would get as much money as the richest guy in your lifetime? No. And what's the point? The first time I went to Dubai, I heard of people having gold taps in the 80s. Gold taps means solid gold. Okay? Now one tap weighs how much? Or at least half a kilo? If one tap weighs half a kilo and they had huge villas, every bedroom with an attached bath. So you can imagine how much gold was in that villa and in the taps only. And then he says, I want more money. So after that first trip to Dubai, I came back and thought again of myself and where am I heading? So if this guy with taps made of gold is not happy, then where's the chance? Nizam of Hyderabad, who was the richest man in the world at one time, had, I don't know, there were descriptions of his wealth, incredible. But that's it. It is insatiable like fire. There is no sample of fire in the world that will say, I've had enough, I don't want more. Fire is ready to swallow up the whole world. You remember the Great Fire of London? It's a historical fact. It spread so fast from one building to another that they had no choice but to demolish buildings to prevent the spread of fire. Yeah? Desire is like that. Once it gets to you, my God, there is no looking back. It doesn't leave you alone. You can't sleep. You go crazy with that desire. See, Ravana, he had multiple wives. He had a harem full of damsels from heaven. But he still wanted one more. And that one more was his undoing. And it's the same with us. Then he says, knowledge, whatever knowledge you have, is veiled by this desire. Because when the desire gets to you, all your wisdom goes. You're very sensible otherwise. You're a normal person otherwise. What gets into you is sometimes unimaginable. There are ordinary people who have lived a life till they get to middle age, to past 50, who have led a straightforward life. Suddenly, a desire gets into them and they do unethical, illegal, immoral things that get them into prison. I don't want to name people, but you all know. And it's so humiliating. Can you imagine a person at the peak of his career where others are bending over backwards to get him on their board and things like that? And suddenly, next thing you know, he's in prison with ordinary, third rate, absolute scum of society. And he had to live there for years. And when he was let out on bail, also he had this thing on his ankle that tracked every movement of his, wherever he went. So he was not free, even then. Why did it happen? Desire. So watch out. And it veils your wisdom. All the knowledge that you have is gone. Because, see, your mind is full of thoughts. I wish I had a board because here physics comes in handy. Can you imagine a trough of water? So there is the incident ray. Light comes in, it hits the water and it's reflected. Okay? So when the water is still, you can see your reflection clearly in the water. Right? If you disturb the water a little bit, what happens? You are there, the light is there, the water is there, everything is the same. But your reflection is not there. You can't see your reflection. Why? Because the water is disturbed. Similarly, your mind. When the mind is calm, incident ray is Atman. Atman, pure consciousness, strikes your mind, and the reflected ray is I know. Can you visualize that? But when the mind is agitated, the mind is there, the thoughts are there, consciousness is there, but I know doesn't come. Why? Because the reflected ray goes all over the place. See, forget this. This is physics. You may not, because I don't have a diagram there, it's difficult to convey. But you may have experienced in your life, you may have gone through it, that when your mind is disturbed, the knowledge that you have is not available to you. You think wrong, you make mistakes, you forget things, the errors. Do you remember doing an exam? You have students, right? Don't you see that the brightest student sometimes does badly in an exam? And an ordinary student gets 100%. How does that happen? Because the brightest student goes to the exam with an agitated mind. He wants to get 98, 100%. And that anxiety is there. Will I get it? Won't I get it? So the mind is agitated. He reads the question paper and his mind is swimming. He can't read. So even though he has the knowledge, he can't access the knowledge because the desire is disturbing the mind. So this happens to us all the time. Therefore, you may have knowledge of any subject or whatever, full 100%, but you're able to tap only to the extent of 40%. It's like a small cloud. You see, during the monsoon, there are times when you look up and you say there's no sun. That's a ridiculous statement. Because look at the size of the sun, it's huge. Compared to that, the cloud is one tiny speck. Yet it covers the sun. Actually, it doesn't cover the sun. You are under the cloud. Suppose you are away from the cloud. Sun will be available to you. That is the thing. So Atman is all pervading. Your desire is one little desire. It seems to cover, but it really doesn't cover. It's like a small cloud covering the sun. But it's not easy to control desire. That's why they've given the example of, in the Shastras, of Vishwamitra, one of the Sapta Rishis. You know the story? He was deep in meditation. And Menaka, the heavenly damsel, comes and dances before him. And the story goes that Vishwamitra fell for Menaka. And the product of their union is Shakuntala. Do you know that? You don't know the story. So anyway, never mind the story. You just have to remember, a sage like Vishwamitra fell for Menaka. So, what is he trying to tell us? It's his, Vishwamitra could have easily taken care of Menaka, that's not the problem. The problem is that he wanted to convey to us, don't take desire easy. Don't think it's easy to overcome desire. It's very difficult. Simple thing like food, desire for food. You make a decision, I will go on a diet. Whatever discipline you want to follow. You'll follow it for 2 days. Third day, you will see your favorite food and say, today I'll take a break. What do you call that? Cheat day. Finished, that's it. Then your whole life becomes cheat. So it's not that easy. Trying to remove desire by giving it the object of desire is like trying to quench a fire by adding fuel to it. It's impossible. Next verse.
The desire for a higher cause is also dangerous because basically it's desire.
No. Because how do you remove desire? By fixing a higher desire. So if you say higher desire is also dangerous, then you'll never improve. So you have to fix a higher desire and work for it with all your might. But with that element of objectivity, that this is not everything in life, I have to move further still. And even the highest desire of self-realization, if you're not objective about it, you'll never get it. Meaning, if you're obsessed about it, you don't get it. Like Sri Ramakrishna, he thought God was in the idol of the goddess. He didn't realize. Till this great sage Totapuri had to come down from the Himalayas, and he noticed this young, bright 29-year-old boy on the verge of realization. So apparently he held a knife to his forehead and said, it's not there, it's here, inside. And he said it so powerfully that for that time he dropped the thought of the goddess and he realized, because that was the last thought. You see? So, higher desire is necessary. Verse 40.
इन्द्रियाणि मनोबुद्धिः अस्याधिष्ठानमुच्यते एतैर्विमोहयत्येषः ज्ञानमावृत्य देहिनम्.
It is said that the sense organs, the mind, and the intellect are the abode of desire. Having obscured wisdom through these, it deludes the embodied. So now he is giving the location of desire. So when you have an infection and you go to the doctor's skill is in diagnosing, is in understanding where the focus of infection is, which sometimes is very different from where the symptom is. So that's the skill of the that's the skill of the doctor. So with this verse, we enter the last topic of this chapter, how to remove the obstacle of desire. So the focus of infection, where does desire live? In the senses. You have desire to see, eat, hear, smell, and touch. Mind, emotional desire. You want to establish relationships, you want fulfillment through them. Intellect, through intellectual pursuit. These are the location of desire. Now there are 5 ways to deal with desire. Number 1, positive desires you must encourage, higher desire. The higher desire in you is usually weak, so it needs reinforcement. Second, harmless desires fulfill. Suddenly you get a desire to eat Chinese food, go fulfill it. There is no point in frustrating that desire. Third, petty desires ignore. Example of a petty desire, somebody wants to buy a pair of shoes and you accompany that person to the mall. You see something, it's casual. You don't need to act on it. Dismiss it. Strong desires you need to analyze. An example of this is desire for marriage. You can't just ignore it. You can't just go headlong into it. You need to think about it, analyze it. And negative desires, you can't afford to act on them. So you just press the delete button on it. Next verse.
तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजह्येनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम्.
Tasmat, therefore, means after a logical, rational presentation, he is now concluding. First, control the senses. O Bharatarshava, bull among the Bharatas, slay this sinful destroyer of knowledge and wisdom. Third term he is using for desire, meaning enemy. So, his conclusion, this rational presentation starts with verse 36, which is Arjuna's question. You remember Arjuna's question? I know what is right, I know what I shouldn't be doing. What is it? Baladiva, as if by force, makes me do what is wrong. So, 37 is Krishna's answer. Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhava. It is desire, it is anger, anger is desire obstructed. Born of the quality of rajas. It is mahashana, it's a great devourer. Mahapapma, it agitates you greatly. Know this as the enemy here. Then 38, he gives 3 types of desire: sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. Examples are like smoke around fire for sattva, like dust on a mirror for rajas, and like the uterus for the embryo. tamas. Then in 39 he says, desire veils wisdom. And we saw that trough of water. 40, he gives the location of desires, senses, mind and intellect. And now he is saying, therefore start with the senses, control the senses, because it is the lowest, easiest to control. Now that itself we are finding it difficult to control. You know? Senses are the lowest, should be the easiest to control. We can't control that. There's no way you're going to be able to control emotional or intellectual desire. So, and then he says, Bharatarshabha, bull among the Bharatas. The cow and bull were worshipped in our country for the principle that they seem to live, which is maximum work, minimum profit. Huh? What does a cow take? Just grass and water. What does it give? Wholesome milk that the whole world consumes. Rich, poor, healthy, sick, children, old people, everyone. It's a universal food. So that principle is what we worship. The cow, therefore, worship of the cow reminds us that we should be living on the principle of maximum giving, minimum taking. Today our principle is what? Grab maximum, give nothing. That is why now Dubai has announced, what is it? Golden visa. Everyone is jumping, everyone wants to go there. Why? No taxation. Nobody wants to pay taxes. But income you want. See, you want to earn money here and go to Dubai and spend. Nah, not a very nice attitude to have. So, Bharatarshabha and Arjuna was a class act. He was a prince. He was brought up on Vedantic principles. He was a genuinely unselfish person, a wonderful personality. He's just fallen into a trap of his own mind, his own making. So, first control the senses because they are the grossest and easy to control. So, unfulfilled desire creates this mental agitation. And the moment you entertain a desire, it is bound to remain unfulfilled. There is no guarantee that your desire will be fulfilled. It destroys your knowledge and wisdom. When the mind is agitated, you have no access to your own knowledge. It's like a surgeon. Surgeon does not operate on his own family members. Do you know that? He could be the best surgeon for that particular thing. But when his own wife or child are the patient, he's incapacitated. He can't operate. So he has to give the surgery to the next person who may not be as skilled as him. When he needs his skill the most, it's not available. So, depending on the strength of the desire, you get incapacitated. So what must we do? Regulate the desire with the intellect, not frustrate it. You know what regulate means? Decide how much to fulfill. When is it becoming dangerous to fulfill? And let it have its way to some extent. So you must be compassionate with your own mind. Next verse, 41.
इन्द्रियाणि पराण्याहुः इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः यो बुद्धे परतस्तु सः.
The senses are proclaimed as great. The mind is superior to the senses, the intellect superior to the mind, and superior to the intellect is He. He means Atma. So he is giving the hierarchy of desires because you go from the lower to the higher. So the lowest is the senses, then comes the mind, intellect, and the highest is Atman. So this hierarchy depends on three things: subtlety, pervasiveness, and power, control. So as you go up, see, the mind controls the senses. So you lose your appetite when you are either extremely joyous or very grief stricken. Like the day of the wedding, the bride and bridegroom can't eat, they've lost their appetite because they're just too happy. Or when you, let's say the results of your board exam comes and you've done exceedingly well, you lose your appetite. You lose a family member, also you lose your appetite. You can go through the whole day without eating, you don't even feel hungry. So that's the power. And it's subtler. And it has control. The mind controls the lower. Similarly, intellect controls the mind, it pervades the mind. And when the mind is agitated, or let's say when the intellect is strong, you overcome your emotional hang-ups also. In other words, if you're committed to a higher goal, you can get along or you can work even with people you dislike. So these are the three things. As you identify with the higher, the lower sublimates. Like let's say you have, there are people in the West who were born eating meat and most part of their lives they've eaten meat. Suddenly in university they are exposed to the torture that animals are put through. And in one clean sweep they become vegan. Other extreme. And they live like that the rest of their life. Next, 43.
एवं बुद्धे परं बुद्ध्वा संस्तभ्यात्मानमात्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं दुरासदम्.
Thus, O Mahabaho, mighty armed one, having known that which is superior to the intellect, having controlled the self mind by the self intellect, slay this unconquerable enemy in the form of desire. So now he is giving it a little inspirational quality, because he's given him everything about Karma Yoga. And he finds Arjuna still there, still overwhelmed by his attachment to Bhishma and looking at things in the personal, from his personal angle. So he says, thus, O Mahabaho, mighty armed one, Arjuna, you're not an ordinary person. You're a mighty warrior, you're a commander-in-chief of the Pandava forces. He's not telling Arjuna this, he's telling all of us. You're not an ordinary person. You know why? In this entire city of Mumbai, there is this handful of people who have this urge to study the Bhagavad Gita. Means your subtle intellect is there. There are people who've come from very far. So don't give it up. Don't give it away. Just for little insignificant, small temptations or distractions. Tell yourself this, that I am no ordinary person, not because we want to be egoistic. But you look around, most people are quite content to be materialistic, right? Isn't it? But the fact that you have this and you are in a position where you are in good health, you have the facilities to study the Bhagavad Gita, they may not come back again. God forbid, if we fall ill, a simple thing like you fall down the stairs and break your bones, you have to be in hospital. So, understand that this is a wonderful opportunity I have and I must grab this. I must do my best. So that's why he says, O Mahabaho, having known that which is superior to the intellect. What is superior to the intellect? Atman. So once you study the Bhagavad Gita, you have some sort of idea of what Atman is. With your intellect, and then your mind also responds to it. I don't know. You don't know what Atman is. But still, when you hear the verses or descriptions of either bhajan or a bhakti devotional approach or the intellectual description, there's something in you that stirs, isn't it? That is your subtle intellect. That's why he says, having known that, you don't know, but there is something in you that stirs, that is suddenly awakened. Sometimes, first thing in the morning, when you wake up and you start studying, you see, there are times when you're so inspired. It doesn't come always, but it's there. That is having known that which is superior to the intellect. Having controlled the mind by the intellect. This is a constant practice. Every moment of your life, your intellect must be used. Like, just before you came, your mind may have said, Chalo yaar, it's sleeping. It's time to sleep, it's raining. I'll skip class today. It's possible. The mind is capable of saying anything. This morning I had a yoga session. My mind could have said, give it up, cancel it. That is what the mind says, You'll get an extra hour of sleep. And I was justified in it because I went to sleep late. I woke up at 4 in the morning. I've been doing this for so many days. I'm sleep deprived. And I could have justified it. And I said, no, I must do it. Intellect says. And I was so happy I did it because after that hour of yoga, I was energetic and peaceful. So, mind is always playing games with you. This is easy. Worse still is the mind imagining. Maybe you said bad things about me. Maybe my mother-in-law is against me. I don't know. These are things that the mind imagines. And these are more difficult to deal with because they're at the emotional level. Mind just is the devil in you. Or it's full of desires. So, having controlled the self, mind, by the self, both are self. No? Mind is also yours, intellect is also yours, but very different. Slay this unconquerable enemy. Now he is giving him a nice punch. You're a warrior, man. And here is an unconquerable enemy. You know why it works? Because Arjuna is a warrior. If he had said it to an 85-year-old lady, she would have said, Jane do, I'll pass the enemy. But because he is talking to a warrior reacts to enemy. And the second thing the warrior reacts to is unconquerable. So, this is psychology that he is using. This you can't use with everyone. You tell an old lady, slay this unconquerable enemy in the form of desire, and nothing happens to her. But to a warrior, he gets activated. So, basically there are two problems with us, two things that are happening with us. One is avarana, means a shrouding of Atman, ignorance. And as a result of this ignorance, there is vikshepa, which is mental agitation. So, the mental agitation is addressed by the three yogas, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and we've seen Karma Yoga in this chapter. Avarana is addressed by knowledge, is countered by knowledge. So you have to just take in the knowledge, and that ignorance goes away. Okay? So, what is our take home from today? What did we discuss? All this time I've been talking, now you have to do the talking. Control the first. Okay, control the senses first. Then what else? Meaning?
Which type of desire is it then act accordingly.
What do you do with desire? How? Yeah, see, there are two ways of overcoming desire. One is pure knowledge. So it's like when a child who's so obsessed with toys grows into a teenager, what happens? Immediately desire for all toys vanishes. He doesn't have to own all the toys that he wanted. He doesn't have to play with all the toys. He just grows and he picks up other superior desires. Teenage desires, you all know. As a result of which, all desires for toys get sublimated. You know the word sublimation? It actually starts with chemistry. It is a process. Some substances go directly from the solid state to the gaseous state without going through liquid. All like water. There is ice, water and steam. Ice doesn't directly become steam. Ice has to go through water. But there are certain substances which sublimate straight away. One of them is camphor. And it is because of this that when we do arti, we light camphor. So camphor represents vasanas. There are certain vasanas that go directly from vasana stage to you can overcome them without plowing through action. The second is powerful vasanas, you have to go through action. That is karma yoga. Okay? Now your wisdom lies in knowing which one sublimates, which one to sublimate and which one to plow through. Right? If it's a very powerful desire, then you have to act it out. You can't sublimate. If it's an ordinary desire, you can sublimate through growth. So, therefore, they say knowledge is the best. Because once you gain knowledge of the higher, automatically all desires of the lower vanish. But you have to have that intellectual power to go through. the path of knowledge. Otherwise, you have to plow through action, which means actually go through action for a higher ideal. So you exhaust that desire, you don't accumulate more. That is the crux of Karma Yoga actually. Using your intellect, fixing a higher ideal in the area of your strong desire, which is, strong desire is? Swadharma, excellent. And because you fixed a higher ideal, you don't acquire more vasanas. Existing vasanas go, you get purified. Get it? Devotion. Ramakrishna, she's asking Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda's guru, who reached the state of realization. He was almost entirely bhakti. How do you sublimate? Same thing. Your love for God is so strong that all other desires pale into insignificance. And the desire for God is almost uncontrollable. So there are bhaktas, even Swami Ramatirtha, who was an out and out intellectual, has experienced, like he's written, that there were nights when he couldn't sleep or he would wake up and the pillow would be wet with tears because of the pain of not having reached God yet. So you're not entirely one or the other. But bhakti is a very, very powerful tool that gets you to, it's like a lover yearning for the beloved. It's so strong that a bhakta's desire, yearning for union with God is much stronger than that. So everything else vanishes in that fire. Similarly, Karma Yoga also. That is the goal, whichever yoga you pursue. Yes. See, with knowledge, you want to remove your ignorance. It's slightly different because you want to get over the three. It's like Yat Swapna Jagara Sushuptam Aveti Nityam. That which is aware of the waking dream and deep sleep state. That indivisible Brahman I am, not this assemblage of elements. So that is knowledge, where you're asserting the truth and you're negating the unreal. Bhakti is just love for God. You want union with God. It's not vague. How is it vague? It's more relatable actually. Because it's like a lover who's yearning to reunite with the beloved. That you can understand. So the same thing is shifted to God. So God is the beloved and you are the lover who is yearning for the beloved.
But when there is no personification or something for God.
Of course there is. Of course. For every bhakta there is an idol. There is a Krishna or a Rama or something.
Idol or his imaginary, we assume that this is an idol.
To a bhakta, it is not imaginary. He is there. Krishna to a bhakta is more real than you are to him. To a bhakta, Krishna is more real than she is. Because wherever you are thinking, that becomes enlarged in your mind. and everything else fades. Like, see, for a mother, the child is everything. So she sees only the child, she doesn't see anything else. So whoever you love, that becomes larger than life. So to a bhakta, that's very, very real.
So then everything and everywhere the Bhakta sees God.
Exactly. Yes, you got it. Which is why when Radha is heartbroken that Krishna is leaving, she says, how will I live without you? Because to her, he was everything. But he was there in flesh and blood. And he says, what a wonderful, your hair stands on end. He says, see me in all beings. And he goes away. But she was also spiritual. So she started seeing Krishna in everyone, in all beings. And she didn't miss him. She immediately overcame that grief. So union, even for a bhakta, is not a physical thing. It's in the mind. I don't know how to explain it. It's like Hanuman and Ram. Hanuman was always separate. You see, that's the thing. You're always separate, but you're one. Think about it. Thank you.
ॐ तत्सद इति श्रीमद्भगवद्गीतासूपनिषत्सु ब्रह्मविद्यायां योगशास्त्रे श्रीकृष्णार्जुनसंवादे कर्मयोगो नाम तृतीयोऽध्यायः।